Item 9, Bike SD SB-1 streets. Is this Nicole?
Yes, thank you, Andy. This recommendations for use of the SB-1 funds, and I believe it actually aligns well with some of the recommendations that we just heard, specifically on street design. So I'm going to pass it over to Kyle Scala with Bike SD.
Hey everyone, I think Everett has a presentation. Yep, there we are. So, hello Mobility Board members. Like Nicole said, my name is Kyle Hastela. I'm with Bike SD. I'm the Interim Executive Director and happy to make a presentation on this proposed letter that we are seeing today. It's about the way that the City of San Diego is using the SB-1 Local Streets and Roads Program funds, and the overview of what we've been able to learn is that some of these funds are being allocated to slurry seals and asphalt overlay projects, and within the FY 2020-2021 budget cycle, there's an estimated $80 million worth of SB-1 Local Streets and Roads Program funds. Not sure if people are familiar with this policy, but I wanted to include it here based on the State's Highway Code Section 2030F. The city shall incorporate complete street elements into projects funded by the program, including but not limited to elements that improve the quality of bicycle and pedestrian facilities, that improve safety for all users of transportation facilities. So our hope with this letter is to ask that the city utilize these funds from SB-1 to better achieve our climate action plan and Vision Zero goals. So the specific goals mentioned here are the 18% bike ridership transportation mode share by 2035 and zero traffic fatalities by 2025. So our hope is that the following recommendations for the 2021 and 22 budget be included. The first two are to prioritize resurfacing, overlay, or reconstruction on Vision Zero corridors and data-driven high crash areas using our strategies for safety. And the second one would be to implement projects in communities of concern to ensure holistic complete streets improvements, including traffic calming projects that have been advocated for by residents in past community plans, but not limited to streetlights, upgrading transit stations, pedestrian crosswalks, LET signals, bike signals, curb extensions, flashing beacon lights for bike separated facilities, signage, diverters, and other recommendations found in the NACTO guidelines. Proposed prioritizations 3 through 5 are for any slurry seal projects that the city uses these funds for, to restripe vehicle lanes in urban areas to be no wider than 10 feet or 11 feet for designated truck and transit routes pursuant to NACTO's guidelines, and for any of these projects to be restriping the street in accordance with NACTO's facility selection matrix for all ages and abilities bike facilities. And then there's an Appendix A that this next prioritization mentions that we'll get to at the end. Number 6 is to increase transportation and stormwater bicycle program staff to properly address street design and as projects are being considered and implemented. And the last one here is request city staff provide a biannual report to the Mobility Board on each segment associated with SB-1 funding, a history of injuries on the corridor, what the bicycle master plan or community plans for in terms of bike lanes, and to explain which complete streets elements are being used or why they're not being included as potential alternatives. And this last one is the Appendix A, current partially funded complete streets or safety capital improvement projects in design or preliminary engineering phases. And I put an asterisk here because I'm not sure this is a comprehensive list. This shows a list of projects being University Avenue Complete Street Phase 1, Talmadge Traffic Calming Infrastructure, Coastal Rail Trail, University Avenue Mobility Plan, the Downtown Complete Street Implementation Phase 3A, El Cajon Boulevard Highland to 58th improvements, Fairmont Avenue Bridge Rehab East, right? Crown Point Drive roundabouts, Torrey Pines Road pedestrian hybrid beacon, North Park Mini Park pedestrian improvements, Beacon Street traffic calming, and West Point Loma and Beacon Street roundabout. And that concludes the presentation, and I'll throw it back to Nicole.
Thank you, Kyle. I'll let, I see a couple of hands raised. Go ahead and start with Rosa. Right. Are you up, or is that your hand still raised from last time? Or
my hand is still raised from last time. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. Let's do Gary Smith.
Hi, Gary Smith. Isn't this in direct conflict with what we just approved? We said we were going to not use engineering as the very first thing, and this one is all about where the most fatalities are, so that's where we're going to put all the work. I'm not sure I can resolve that conflict.
On the last letter in Vision Zero, I believe it was number 4 in the top. It is about street design rather than enforcement, and so proper street design is super valuable. And looking at high crash data areas and communities of concern is addressing some of those
but
equities.
If you look at that list, I'm not sure any single one of those projects is in an area that you just spoke of.
And as mentioned, that list is not totally complete, but yes, there has been outreach to those, and I believe we should have more outreach into those communities. There is some, and yes, rightly so, right? We need to make sure that they are in those communities.
Well, that's my question, because if this is based on data, then it is what it is. But if we're going to go by the priorities that we just approved, then we can't go just by data. So I don't understand why we're putting ourselves in conflict here with ourselves. Maybe I'm a little dense.
The data, as many of us know that have been working with Vision Zero, the data reveals that actually most of the corridors are in communities of concern, some of the most dangerous corridors.
Then why don't we require the city staff to justify why they're doing these other areas? Because right in that recommendation, there, it says it's being driven by the data.
And I believe the Vision Zero would support the recommendations. But I'll let them weigh in if there's anybody that wants to speak on that behalf.
Are there other comments? Stefan?
Yes, so Gary does have a point about the list in Appendix A. I think it probably does reflect a historic inequitable distribution of planning resources and engagement with communities, Coastal Rail Trail, the Ocean Beach ones. All those are places where, we've kind of, we're the advocates and I think a lot of our planning efforts have gone into developing these projects where historically we haven't paid as much attention to communities of concern. So I'm not sure that we need to necessarily include that list in Appendix A. I mean, I certainly think all those projects are worthwhile, but the prioritization should reflect a more data-driven and equity analysis-based approach to identifying where the funding goes. But I think Gary's not correct in saying that, proposing engineering changes is inconsistent with the Vision Zero approach, because absolutely the Vision Zero approach has been and continues, even under the recommendations we just addressed, to make streets built in a way that the safe thing to do is the obvious thing to do. So we really should be refocusing our money on street design to make these places safer like this. There's a natural tension here in this process, because on the one hand, we as advocates have been urging the city to implement projects faster, and the more kind of construction infrastructure you put into the projects, and you go from just restriping to doing traffic calming and curb extensions and all that, it's going to take more money and more engineering and more time. But we have to strike a balance here. We have to start shifting to just doing the easy thing to doing the best thing. And so I support the letter overall, and I'm willing to entertain a discussion about the Appendix A section.
All right, thanks, Stefan. Alex.
Hi, I just wanted to sort of, I guess at this point, restate and also recast the comments that Stefan just made. I think if you look at these two letters with sort of the attitude that they are final policy documents, then it's easy to sort of lose the forest for the trees. Ultimately, city staff, is my understanding, is going to be working this out. These are recommendations that are kind of being sent from here. So what you really have to do is understand these letters for what they're saying, which is, basically a set of recommendations. And this list of sites is just one part of the letter. So we can kind of tear our hair out wordsmithing these things, or you can kind of understand the letter as a whole, which is about, as Stefan said, using these funds, much more wisely than perhaps we've been using them in the past. And so I think when you understand it in that way, then any of these imagined conflicts sort of, cease to exist, in the sense that we're not dictating policy, for example, right? We're making recommendations, and policy is tricky because there are competing interests, and that has to get worked out. But first we have to even know what our interests are, right? And I think the two letters combined do a pretty good job of articulating that.
If you read our charter, we are supposed to be making policy recommendations. And therefore, I would be perfectly happy with that second one if we deleted the Appendix A.
Which I am okay with. Nicole.
Okay, so we don't have a motion yet on the item.
I will read the item reading Appendix A.
Okay, so Gary's made the motion to support the letter without the Appendix A. Is there a second?
I'll second, but you have two hands raised as well.
I know, but I just wanted to get that motion out there. So unless folks have already spoken, I see hands for Kyle. Let's go to Kyle. Anything else, Kyle?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that the intention of this letter came from interactions between bicycle advocates and other community advocates, maybe seeing that SB-1 funds were not being used to include complete streets analysis, or to prioritize complete streets as is referred to in the state policy. So the intention behind the letter is to see if we can connect and tie SB-1 funding to these complete street efforts and improve the conditions of our streets rather than just replacing the design as it exists today.
Thanks for that, Kyle, and I agree with you there. That's how my understanding of it as well. Alex, did you have another comment?
Hey,
No, sorry.
Okay.
Andy, if I could.
Sure.
We're up
Thanks.
against time.
Yep.
So if we could conclude this item and then we can table the rest for the next meeting.
I'm fine with that. Everett, did you have anything to add as far as this item on the city's use of SB-1 or anything to add input on this?
I think we can work on this maybe as a follow-up to bring back some responses, but not in the time remaining.
Okay.
Subsequent meeting, it's a broadcast after this.
Okay. All right. Well, then I want, there is a motion in a second, and I'm going to call roll. So, Alex.
Yay.
Daniel.
Yay.
Gary.
Yay.
Umberto.
Yay.
Hold on, everyone. Sorry. Maya.
Support.
Nicole.
Yay.
Noli.
Support.
Rosa.
Support it.
Serge.
Support.
Stefan.
Support.
And I will add my support. So that's unanimous for support. So with that, thank you all for attending. We will skip the subcommittee reports and the updates. And our next meeting will be November 4th. All right. Thank you all.